Am I the jerk for cutting my parents off after they forgot me after a camping trip? It all began with a seemingly innocent camping trip that turned into a defining moment in my relationship with my parents. As summer approached, they decided that a family camping adventure would be the perfect way to bond and create lasting memories. Little did I know that this trip would test the boundaries of our relationship. Excitement bubbled within me as we packed our bags and set off for the wilderness. The destination was a picturesque lakeside campsite surrounded by towering trees and a tranquil, glistening lake. The first day was a blast. We set up the tents, gathered firewood, and enjoyed a delicious barbecue under the open sky. We hiked, shared stories, and basked in the beauty of nature. Everything was just as I had hoped it would be. However, on the second day, things took an unexpected turn. We had planned a day of fishing by the lake, and I eagerly joined my parents as we set off with our fishing gear. As we found a cozy spot along the water's edge, I felt a sense of togetherness that I hadn't experienced in a while. But as the day wore on, I began to notice something peculiar. My parents' conversations were increasingly centered around their own interests and seemed to sidestep involving me. Hours passed, and I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that I was fading into the background of their excursion. When lunchtime arrived, they unpacked sandwiches for themselves, but didn't bother to ask if I was hungry. I was baffled. Was I becoming invisible to them? My efforts to join their conversations were met with vague responses and distracted nods. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, it became clear that my parents were more focused on their own world than on the family trip we had embarked on. The last straw came when they packed up their fishing gear without a word, leaving me to gather my things alone. It was as if I didn't matter, as if my presence had become an afterthought. Back at the campsite that evening, my frustration and hurt had reached their peak. I confronted my parents, voicing my feelings of being left out and neglected during what was supposed to be a family bonding experience. Their initial response was one of surprise, as if they hadn't realized the impact of their actions. My mother's eyes welled with tears, and my father looked ashamed. They explained that they had become so wrapped up in their own world that they hadn't realized how they were sidelining me. They apologized profusely, acknowledging their mistake and vowing to make it up to me. While their words held sincerity, I found it hard to shake off the feeling that this wasn't just a simple oversight. It felt like a reflection of deeper underlying issues in our relationship. In the days that followed, my parents made an effort to include me in activities and conversations, but the damage had been done. The camping trip had revealed a divide that I hadn't been aware of before. As time went on, the wounds from that experience refused to heal, and I found myself withdrawing emotionally. It wasn't an easy decision, but I chose to distance myself from my parents, not out of spite, but for the sake of my own well-being. The camping trip had highlighted a pattern of neglect that extended beyond that one instance, and it became clear that I needed to prioritize my own happiness and sense of self-worth. So, am I the jerk for cutting my parents off after they forgot me on that camping trip? It's a question that continues to weigh on my mind. But in the end, I've come to realize that taking care of my own emotional health and setting boundaries is not a selfish act. It's an act of self-preservation. Sometimes, the most difficult decisions are the ones that lead us to a path of healing and growth.